Hi everybody, this is Anissa. Welcome back to the podcast Outrospection. I wanted to ask you one thing. What if taking no risk will end up being your biggest risk? In today's episode, I had the pleasure to welcome Torge Schwandt. Torge is a freelance content writer and one of the co-founders of Invisible Media. He kindly accepted my invitation, and together we spoke about how taking risk can sometimes lead you to a better life. If you are interested in hearing more about his story, then keep listening. Hi, and welcome to Outrospection, the podcast that gets you out of your head and opens you to others. How are you doing?
I'm great.
Yes. So today I'm very excited to have you as a guest because I wanted to have the perfect occasion to call you and say, would you like to come to the podcast and have a chat with me? And I think that time has come. So
It's good. No, I appreciate that. I really enjoy being here. And as I just said earlier, like it's my first guest experience on the podcast. So excited to do this.
Yeah, because you're going to tell us a little bit more about your own experience with podcasts and what you've been doing before. But before that, maybe you could tell our audience who you are, where you're from, just a few information about you so they can have a bit of context.
Sure, happy to do that. So my name is Torge Schwandt. I'm originally from Germany. I've been living in Luxembourg for 5 years now. And I'm actually originally from a small city called Rostock, right at the coast of the Baltic Sea. So whoever's listening to this and has not been there yet, you should go. It's a beautiful little town with nice beaches and just a great, also in a great location because it's only 2 hours away from Berlin and 2 hours away from Hamburg, which are two of my, or probably the two most favorite cities in Germany. But besides that, I think you just briefly mentioned it. The podcasting part, I do work in podcasting. I've actually had the honor and pleasure to have co-founded a podcast production company with a few friends of mine, which has been a very exciting and rewarding journey where I learned a lot. And I'm actually working being a self-employed. Have been doing that for the last almost year and a half, and basically working on that own company and also supporting other startups as a freelancer, mainly with a focus on business development topics and also content production with a special focus on audio.
Nice. That's actually how I found out about you because I was listening to the podcast you produce and I just found out that one of the co-founder of this podcast was here in Luxembourg. So this is actually, it was my first motivation and the first reason why I contacted you. It's like, oh yeah, that's so good. When you like something and you just have the occasion to contact the owner or the producer or the content writer behind that's amazing. Yeah,
no, and I really I thought it was great that you did that because I always love to connect also to new people, new professional connections that love to chat about something that I'm also very passionate about, and that was the case in when we first met for lunch. But obviously luckily some great conversations have followed based on that, and not just talking purely about podcasts, but all the other, let's say, stuff that
live
exactly that is connected to it. And so that's been really great to getting to know you through that. And podcasting, as I just said, has enabled me to do a lot of things, meet a lot of people, and just create something that I hope reaches a lot of people, or as many people as possible, and hopefully has a positive impact on their life. And I think the podcast that you mentioned was actually Startup Notes.
Yes.
It still exists. It is actually a bit on hold at the moment, but that was basically just a hobby project from a few friends of mine that I then joined after they started it initially, 3 of them. And so I became the 4th guy to join them. And then, we interviewed entrepreneurs and venture capital investors throughout Europe, but mainly from Germany, mainly from Berlin, actually. And that has been really a great way to learn about that particular topic, about how to build, a company in the digital age that we live in. And based on that experience, and just like we're sitting here right now recording a podcast, with the equipment and all that, like we kind of became experts on that more or less. And then we decided to, take that experience and try to, let's say, put our money where our mouth is, as they say, as the saying goes, and to actually try to build a company based on that. And that became Invisible Media, which has or is still producing audio shows for mainly at the moment actually a company from Berlin called Blinkist. We've had the pleasure to realize a project called State of Mind with them, and so that's been also a really interesting journey so far. And so podcasting was a good reason to meet, and
yes,
it's always
medium. A good reason to meet. But actually, I remember exactly our first conversation. So the first time we met, this first conversation inspired me today's episode. Basically, because you said so many different things about yourself, about your own journey. And I think we spent probably 1 hour and a half or 2 maybe talking about the things you've gone through, your choices in life, your professional life, basically. And there were a lot of things you mentioned that made me realize that you've accepted at some point in your life to take risk. And this was actually rewarding, because today everything you're doing is actually very interesting, and
thank you.
and people will find out why. But I feel like I just had this impression that if you didn't have take all this risk, somehow you would not have come to that point. And this is the reason why I wanted to have you today. It was also because I wanted to discuss that, how risk-taking can lead you to a better life, how taking risk helps you to get to that point, where you are right now. And before jumping into that topic, I wanted to come up with a very strange question, but I think this is a funny way to discover our guest. And I wanted to ask you, if your life was a movie, what would be the name of it?
Yeah, I love that question. And just quickly before I answer it, also as a disclaimer, because you just said I said a lot of interesting things, and I appreciate you mentioning or saying that, because I don't really necessarily think about myself to be that interesting. you
are.
But okay, thanks a lot. I take that as a compliment, but I wanted to give you credit for actually, back then already having steered that conversation away by, to get to these moments that you found interesting, because you asked the right questions, and that's very important. And something I mentioned earlier before we started recording, that in life a lot of the things that we now want to cover, it comes down to starting by asking the right questions. And so to answer that particular question, is my first question the right question? I do think so. Because it's a great question to I would call it almost like an icebreaker. Yes. to start with something funny, personal, and just to not take yourself too seriously, because this is not to be a lecture in any sense. It's not supposed to be a lecture. Definitely. In any sense. But to answer the question, my movie title about my life so far would be From East Berlin Out into the World, a road movie. And I came prepared, I have to admit. I thought about it on the way here while I was driving, so it was basically a road movie already. Interesting. And it has also this very international dimension that was part of your life, and maybe that somehow influenced your choice. Would you like to take us back a little bit to that one time you decided to take a risk? And maybe before that, even try to give us your own definition of risk. Sure. I think, I earlier also Googled the definition of risk. We together did that because I always like to define things. And it said that it's actually, it means that you're undertaking an activity with the danger of loss, harm, or just, let's say, disaster. But to be honest, I would not define risk, let's say, in my life in that sense, because I don't think I'm, let's say, the craziest risk taker out there in this world. Not at all. I'm always, my dad taught me early on to always, as he says, like in German, to have one eye, to safety always when you do things. So I do that. So I always try to make sure that I do things in a considerate way. Especially, let's say, in a physical sense. So I would probably not jump down, a mountain or from a mountaintop just with a wingsuit, even though I admire these type of people, but I'm not, let's say, this type of risk taker, So, but the risks, as I also told you in our preparation conversation, the way how I look at it is in a sense of that. Yes, it's true. I have made decisions in my life that led me to different places, and kind of, assembled this road movie so far where I've taken them under uncertainty, and uncertainty meaning that I always have, let's say, considered all the facts that I had at this, given moment in time. Let's say when I made the decision to move to Luxembourg, I, of course, could not plan it out how, the next 5 years would develop. I actually even thought I would only stay here for a year or two and then, move with my girlfriend somewhere else, because we're young. We're even, a bit younger back then. I thought, just everything's open. There's everything's possible. And that is basically exactly the point, So she's the reason I moved here, It's a kind of a romantic story that we actually met abroad in Barcelona, and it was to be honest, kind of this typical movie cliche like love at first sight, and that I was just on the way to actually, let's say, about to move to the US to do my master's degree. For 1 year in Seattle, and I just met her right before that, a week before, and then over, let's say, the course of the next year, we basically already started, to be in a relationship, and then ultimately get to the point where I made the decision to move to Luxembourg. But I've done that only based on the information I had at hand back then, and based on my, let's say, own desire of what I wanted to happen next. So, but that means there's always a risk involved when you do these type of things. And for me, this risk is more, I would rather than describe it as an uncertainty that I've never been afraid to, let's say, tap into or to explore, to see what can actually come out of this, instead of being, just afraid of looking at what could go wrong, the possible harm or loss or disaster, as the definition says. Like, I never looked too much at that. I always, in my life so far, when I made certain decisions that would be, let's say, or would have been life-changing, I always looked on what I could gain,
Yes.
So
I think that's the part that is missing in this definition that you found, which was very generic, is it never talks about the growth, the joy, and the success you can get out of risk. It's always about the harm and the danger, which is still something you can face at some point, but it never mentions anything that can also be rewarding. What do you think?
Totally, and this is exactly the thing. I mean, I think people are always kind of conditioned by now, at least in the Western world, to focus on the short-term gains and the instant gratification, and what the rewards could be, and without taking too much risk or having to work for it too hard, So for me, though, and I think it's mainly been these moments when I made the decision to go abroad to, this already started when I was 16. So I lived in the US for a high school exchange year when I was 16, and something I remember a lot of my classmates were actually afraid of to do. They were afraid of losing their friends. They were afraid of missing out something, in our, let's say, hometown high school, all these type of things. But for me, it was always like this, okay, there's only this opportunity now. I can only do this now as a 16-year-old to have this high school exchange experience. I can, of course, later on go and study there again or go and travel. But for me, it was always clear, like, okay, there's something that I could not do here at home, and I'd be happy to, let's say, sacrifice that in a certain way for a short amount of time, and then reap the rewards later on. And it has been, so far since I was 16, been let's say almost a half of my life already, I've been reaping the rewards from actually that decision back then. Just by being able to speak English well, this was only all credit, or I can credit that to having had the opportunity and just great joy of being in the US as a high school student for 1 year, So, and this is why the point is, yes, people focus too much often on what could go wrong and what they could miss out on or whatever, instead of saying, look, if I do that and it goes well, I'll be actually a step further in my life, in my development. I'll have probably, new friends. I'll have new, life experience that you cannot buy, instead of just doing it,
That's true. And why do you think people are so focused on what could go wrong?
Why is that? I think it's actually quite natural, to be honest, in the sense that when you look at it in terms of like development, how have human beings developed over all the thousands of years that we are on this planet, or even millions of years, I think it is because we learned how to recognize when there's a danger. So in order to increase our survival rate, we had to know that there could be a dangerous animal in the forest or whatever. But the problem is that we are now living in a world where there's a lot of perceived dangers that aren't critical to our survival anymore. But we've kind of not maybe overcome this genetic imprint of realizing, okay, I can make this choice and I can always really look at the facts instead of maybe making a decision based on this instinct of fear,
Yes.
So I think it is from an instinct, and fear in itself is not bad. So I don't want to blame anybody who's, let's say, maybe afraid to take a risk. It's just I rather would like to encourage somebody to take a risk or take a decision under uncertainty, because there's just so much more to be gained than to be lost. But this fear, as I said, like it's very human. So But this is something maybe people have to recognize and become more conscious about, like how much are we steered by those maybe genetic imprints or instincts, and when do they benefit me and when do they actually then do harm me. So a fear can be positive because it can protect me from something, but a fear can also be hindering me in my life's journey, and this is something people need to realize. But before that, actually, they have to learn how to learn about themselves and figure out who they are themselves, And I think this is also a big part missing, that we're not really being taught, let's say, in school to figure yourself out first, but to more or less just learn things so you can function in a certain economic system that's existing, And I think all this part of taking risks or making decisions under uncertainty it comes down much more to the human dimension, like who we are as human beings, instead of just let's say a production factor in an economy. I hope this somehow makes sense.
Yes, no, totally. I was also wondering, so you decided to join your girlfriend here in Luxembourg a few years ago. What was your mindset when you decided to settle down here and to just start a new life here? What did you expect from this country? What did you expect from yourself?
It's a good question. I think the good thing was that I did not think about it too much.
Okay.
So, and that's also true actually by evaluating a risk. Sometimes it's good to not know everything and not all the details, but to get to this, let's say, critical mass of information that you need until you can take the decision.
You had enough?
I had enough information. Okay. I knew, I was in love with her. I wanted to be with her, and I'm still in love with her, and I want to be with her. So that hasn't changed, but that's good. And but I just knew back then, this gave me a reason. I wanted to explore what life would be like when her and I are in the same place, because we had 1 year of long distance relationship when I was in the US and did my master's degree.
Which is tough, honestly.
Yeah, and just to start off a relationship that was kind of already a, let's say, not so common decision, I guess, in our today's world and our generation, where we all are afraid also to commit to things too early and so on. But we both did that. We committed, and I had enough information to know, okay, I want to be here, be with her. And I had enough information to know that Luxembourg is a country that, well, it's not like moving to a developing country, So I knew it's a very well organized, let's say, European country right in the heart of Europe. That I wanted to know more about, because I actually realized after I first met her that I don't know that much about Luxembourg itself. So I did not know about, how international it really is. I did not know how, just amazing it can be to meet so many people from all over this world just in this small little country. That's for me kind of like a hidden gem. So this is like, but I knew, let's say, that back then that I had the information, I can, embark on something new that's not too crazy or not too risky maybe. I can be with her, and I can also start building a career after I graduated, because I knew Luxembourg had a lot to offer. So let's say all these factors of what do you need to live a normal or live a good life, they were existing, So the big uncertainty was just, you never know if it really works out, or you never know if
but you can never really know. There's nothing you can do or a sign that will just fix things forever. You have to work for it every single day. And that's also the very interesting part.
Yeah.
So you just moved to Luxembourg. You knew you could maybe find a job. What type of career did you pursue when you arrived?
So I actually, there were two, let's say, dimensions that were important for me when I took the first job when I moved here. I mean, I have to admit that I was a bit lucky to find the job because I met the CEO of the company that I used to work for back then at a bar.
Okay, nice.
So sometimes, there's coincidences or luck or whatever you want to call it. I do believe in that some things happen, and also then you just kind of either you have to decide to go for it or you don't go for it. But
That's
I
true.
was lucky enough to get offered a job based on a very good conversation over a beer with a stranger. So the CEO of that company was looking for young people to join, actually a startup, and I wanted to work in a startup. So that was basically already,
that was something you already knew.
Yes, I knew I wanted to, after having had worked in a bigger corporation before and in consulting, I knew I wanted to now embark on this startup journey and learn all about, what it takes to build a company and ideally, join a rocket ship, so to say it in this kind of romanticized way, So, and for me, it sounded definitely very appealing, but because I was lucky enough that it was not just a startup, but a startup also in the field that I was familiar with, which was back then waste and recycling. So I started my career working for a French corporation called Veolia, and so I had experience in that field, and then I was lucky enough to find something I was interested about, but with a, let's say, familiar industry. And so that then led me to a lot of other good things and to more, career learnings and opportunities. It was a good entry point.
Okay. And during that time, when you just joined this startup, did you realize that joining a startup is always a risk?
It is, because, and that's I think definitely true for startups, that they are so dynamic in the way that what, let's say, supposedly is set in stone one day might not be the next day anymore. And with bigger corporations, I think when you do your research, when you apply for a job, like, you can be more sure about what you can expect in terms of company culture, role, even compensation, all these type of things. So there's more hard facts that kind of stay stable over time, because these companies have been around for a while and all this, right? But with a startup, it can be all or nothing.
Yes.
And let's say I bought into a vision that I still do believe in, and if the guys happen to listen to this podcast at some point, I can just say that they are onto something really, really special that the world definitely needs, So it's just to say it in short, it's a new type of power plant to eliminate waste and create sustainable energy from it, and in a very sophisticated way. And but at the same time, a vision how shall I say, execution needs to follow, and that is very difficult, and especially in an industry like that is very complex. And software engineering is complex too, but I think hardware engineering is that's what they always say, hardware is hard, so it's even more difficult. So my point is, to more precisely answer your question, is that you only learn on the fly what you're up to there, or what you got into, and then you got to kind of reassess and reevaluate either every day or every year, or however you function. But you gotta then make sure, are you still on the right track to what you want to accomplish? And for me, then I have to admit, I after 2 years realized that I didn't need to move on. It was time for a new experience. Yeah.
And do you think this is really something for everyone?
No, I don't think so. No, and it's definitely something I actually want to really emphasize on, that startups and entrepreneurship is not for everyone. I mean, I do believe that everybody can be or could be an entrepreneur, but because I do believe that, inherently we're all creators. We're all, as human beings, are problem solvers, naturally. And this is for me what entrepreneurship is about. It's this word that for me just basically means finding solutions to problems and challenges, that arise newly every day. And some people do not feel comfortable having this uncertainty every day, or having this even stress every day, and even though I do believe like it always comes down to the individual if you feel stressed or not, because some people thrive in these environments. They hate having a stable, let's say processes or stable, like very orderly way of doing things every day. They are much better in the startup environment. But other people, I think, are just way better off by working for the government or, a corporation, which can also be exciting and rewarding, so don't get me wrong. But for me personally, I realized that it's this, I don't want to know yet what can be, let's say, the maximum of what I can reach. Like I do believe firmly, and I have this ambition and drive to just, build or create that impact that I want to see in this world. And for me, that was a realization over the time and the things I did before I then moved to Luxembourg, that entrepreneurship is that thing I want to learn more about and that journey I want to embark on to actually create the things I want to see in this world, and because that was good that I actually started my career in a corporation working for Veolia, learned a lot, but realized it's not the perfect place for me. And so I've actually decreased the number of employees and since the beginning of my career till now, so over the last 10 years, since I started working while I was still studying, which is like a degree in Germany where we are a trainee, and I did a business degree. So I was working in this corporation for 3 years. And then after that, it was a company of, I think, only 20 people. And then after that, it was still around 20, and then less and less. So now it's only me.
Yeah.
So from 10,000 to 1. Yeah.
Good. And when you decided this was your time, or your time was over at this startup, did you have a plan for what would come next?
Yes, I did. I have to admit that I would also recommend that to other people too, even though, the theme of this episode is to take risks and deal with uncertainty, that it is good to, let's say, increase the certainty. So I did not just, quit the job and then started to look around what could be next. So there were a few months before that when I already initiated the process of having conversations with people that, could recommend me to, a new career path or a new company or whatever. I looked online, browsed for jobs, all these things. So I would recommend people to always kind of, when they feel like they're getting to a point when they need a change, plan a little bit ahead. So don't just make the jump and then try to figure it out. It all comes down to balance, let's say. Yes, you need to make the jump at some point, but you will do better probably when you try to prepare that jump.
Yeah, true. So a risk can also be intentional. Like
exactly.
you can also decide, okay, I want to make it when I do this, or I have this answer.
Totally true. And for me, this was the case. So I realized back then, okay, I did my fair share of learning there. I realized I do like the industry a lot, but it was, as I said, hardware, and I wanted then to move on actually to what was more en vogue, and I think is still just only maybe 1% accomplished, which is the whole digital world. So digitalization is just this major, mega trend we've been seeing for a long time now, but it's just accelerating more and more every day. And I wanted to be part of that. So I wanted to learn about how to build software products. So I joined then as a fintech startup because now I'm just kind of trying to describe my decision process so that people understand, as I said, I'm not the guy who jumps off the cliffs, but I'm the guy that at least considerately tries to take a risk. And I joined another startup instead of joining a bigger company again. It's because, as I said, I knew this is for me and I want to continue that. But it was the risk involved that I did not know the industry. So I did not know financial technology, and I didn't know anything about how to build or sell a software product. But then I joined this fintech for 1 year, and luckily I got all those questions answered. But at the same time, leading to another realization that also there, after 1 year, I wanted to move on and do something else.
But did you know why you needed to change, when you needed to move on to something else?
I do think that I have a very high level of curiosity, let's say within myself. I could spend all day reading about interesting stuff because this world just has so much fascinating things to offer,
Yes.
So, and I do think that's a strength on the one side, but it can also be, let's say, a weakness by, then being attracted too quickly to too many things, But as I say, the world just has too much to offer, and I think you got to explore it, but then sometimes you also got to know when to focus. But that just as a, let's say a side comment. But I do think that the curiosity is probably the biggest driver that I have, curiosity, and I do invest myself very, let's say, like wholeheartedly in the things that I do. So if I had found out that, you know, startups is not for me, I would have not continued on that journey and maybe pivoted to my career track again a bit. But I realized that I want to, again, at that point, I want to stay in startups because I am so curious to learn more about it, and I've not found I've not gotten to all the conclusions that I want to get at yet, you know. So there was still so much left for me to be learned. And I do think also to just mention that life is about lifelong learning. So I don't think you will ever be finished with anything.
You've never arrived.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You might settle physically or whatever, but if you have this, and we talked about this earlier, this mindset of, you know, learning, growing, and wanting to do more out with your life than where you already are at right now, then you just got to follow that. And I realized that there's just so much more that I want to know, but then you need to figure out what's the best way, what's the best option, what's the right place for me where I can learn this. And for me, I realized that then that company was not the right place anymore.
Okay.
But as I said, the drive to continue on that journey was still there, or even bigger, and that's why I then decided to leave them and then actually embark on that personal risk to become fully self-dependent, which is working as a freelancer or working as a, you know, commerçant indépendant, as they call it in Luxembourg.
Yeah, and this is definitely not an easy one. And I think this is where, for me, I found your story very interesting because, you know, from the big corporation you started to work for, to the startups experiences and all of that, you just came to that realization that, okay, now you wanted to work for yourself.
Right. Yeah.
And that's a big choice, you know, in life, and especially here in Luxembourg, because I don't think we have a huge culture of freelancing, you know, that's Luxembourg is really known for like stability, security, jobs, and that's great. You know, I'm not complaining about that, because this is why this country has to offer so many jobs to so many people, and that's amazing. But at the same time, it's difficult for people who are not feeling like they should keep working for someone else to really find their place here, because you don't really have a lot of people to look up to. You know, it's not like, oh yeah, I know so many people who are already doing that and they can live from it and they earn some money, and that's actually tricky, and it makes you sometimes reconsider your own choice of, okay, am I doing the right thing? Because here it's not something that a lot of people are doing, so maybe I'm wrong. So I don't know. What was your thought process during that time?
Yeah, I mean, it made me feel a mix between excited, but at the same time also a bit worried. And I have to be honest about that, because this is the thing in the conversation around entrepreneurship and startups and also freelancing, that a lot of people always try to focus on the, let's say, glamorous part when it all works out. But when you are on that journey and you are in these moments of uncertainty, I think you have to find your own balance between, you know, let's say, always realizing and reminding yourself why you're doing this. So you need to be, I think, very certain on your drive and passion.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And then also learn to get comfortable with the uncomfortable and the uncertainty. So it's this mix between kind of, you know why I'm doing this, and at the same time, this might not work out, and I should rather start applying for a new job again.
No, you're right. So, I think this is how it makes the uncomfortable more comfortable. It's still going to be uncomfortable anyway, but if you know why you're doing this, it makes things a bit easier.
It makes it a bit easier.
Yes.
And it makes it easier also then when you have a bit of a safety net and to hedge your risks. You know, this means like I knew that I, you know, need to find a way, so I could not continue. Let's say I couldn't work without a salary for a whole year or anything. So I knew I could work on my own company without a salary for a while, you know. But then I knew there must be the point again when I start bringing in new cash, you know. So,
yes.
And so this is also something where, again, you need to then be comfortable knowing I'll do this for 3 months without a salary and not be afraid every day in that time, and then again recalibrate and see, okay, can I continue? You know, how can I get the things that I need to live comfortably? You know, so I do think being outside the comfort zone, which is so often cited, you know, is very true. But I do think you also need to know what your comfort zone is, that you need to function well, so that you can function well outside the comfort zone. You know what I mean? So there's both, and I think by always keeping that in check, this kind of determines your feelings. So for me, it has been, kind of these both, let's say, extremes between super excited, super happy, relieved, you know, to be not working anymore for someone else except myself. But then, of course, the focus and concentration that derives from a bit of worry, you know, that you can then turn into something good again. Because I do think, and this is what we discussed earlier as well, is you always have the choice, how do I want to react to a certain thing, you know? Like, it's not like we're, let's say, a victim to our emotions all the time. So even though at moments I had been worried or even afraid or, you know, stressed, I can then always catch myself again and realize, okay, what is it? What is causing this?
Yes.
What do I need to take care of next so that I can eliminate maybe these negative feelings that then prevent me from being in my best, you know, to then deliver my best performance. So I think knowing oneself is probably the most important. Well, I don't know if it's a skill, but definitely something I would recommend to people to learn about, you know, figuring themselves out.
Yeah. I wanted to go back to that part because you just said that obviously you need to know your why. This is what makes the uncomfortable more comfortable. But I think another thing you somehow mentioned is also to know yourself and to ask yourself the right questions before you decide to do anything. And I'm just curious to hear, you know, what made you ask yourself the right questions? When did you decide that asking yourself questions or start by knowing yourself would help you make better choices?
Yeah. I think I have to give a lot of credit to people like Tim Ferriss, and all these other great podcasters out there. And this, you know, ties back into what we said earlier. Podcasting really has been a gift to me in my life in these last, you know, 4 or 5 years since I really started actively to listen to podcasts and then work on my own podcasts. Right?
Yes.
So it's for me, even though a lot of people always say, you know, reading books is the ultimate way to find wisdom, but I do think it's just there's so many ways of learning and learning from other people's experiences and their wisdom. And for me, podcast is just, let's say, another medium that holds the same wisdom like a book. You know, I like books, I love books. I have the tendency to buy way more than I actually read. But that's what I said. I'm so curious. I consume content, let's say, on so many different, you know, platforms or through so many different mediums that I always have my fair share of learning, and I give credit to other people that have been through these situations before, so that it would actually increase my certainty of that I'm on the right track. So saying that, you know, listening to podcasts, learning from other entrepreneurs in these interviews, you know, then it would give me so many clues and inspiration and guidance, even though I have never met these people, you know.
Yes.
But then also, of course, talking to other people that have been through it, having a good, you know, let's say support network is one thing. And support network means talking to people, you know, I have to give most credit to my girlfriend, of course, too. I can just pour my heart out, you know, and tell her everything, even though she's not working in the same industry like me, you know, but that helps to be out of that, let's say, tunnel vision of what your journey is, and talk with people to get more, let's say, the outside view and the bigger picture. But then also, if you have a very specific goal, you know, within whatever your career track is, go talk to people that are already there where you want to get at, you know. And so try to build yourself a network that also before you need it, actually, but then, you know, tap into that power of, you know, of other people that are around you, or even don't be afraid to reach out to people like, you know, like you did. And again, I don't think that you know, I don't think of myself so highly in the way that, you know, I've already done it all, see it all, not at all. And I really appreciate you that, you know, wanted to still have me in front of the mic, that I should share my story up to this point, and that I think is very kind of you, and very special that you're not trying to focus on the people that are already, you know, have already built the unicorn and sold whatever, you know, IPO'd the company and all these things that we always take as success measures. You know, I like that we've had these conversations before where it's more about being honest, opening up about, you know, these type of topics and learning from each other. And this is something that people underestimate. So I think this is actually just the point I was just trying to make. People underestimate what they can learn from others. And it all starts by asking the right questions, asking yourself the right questions, and then make sure that when you go into a meeting and prepare, and I have to be honest, you know, to share this little secret maybe, but in 95% of all the meetings that I go to, even if it's just 5 minutes in the bus, but I always prepare. I always read up on people. I always write down questions that I want to ask them. Like I never only leave it, let's say, to serendipity. Like, I'm a big fan of serendipity in terms of like, who could I meet at a certain event maybe. But if I go talk to people, I want to make sure that I maximize the value that I can get, but also, of course, the other side, because I hate networking where it's just transactional in one way. I rather believe in authentic relationships and that you can teach things each other,
So, I mean, bottom line is, would you encourage people to take a risk?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And I think everybody, just has to maybe understand their risk affinity or the level of risk affinity. Some might, be willing to take bigger risks. Some might be willing to take smaller risks. But yes, I think, the biggest risk of it all, and this is something that I actually am happy that I remembered right now, because I had this thought on the way here in the car that for me, the biggest risk is to not have taken any risks in terms of I do not want to regret when the day I die that I did not try my best and to be my best and to leave a positive impact, in this world. Because I do think in all this talk and conversation about growth and, and startups and all that, for me, it ultimately always comes down to also be in service of others, and and I really mean it. Like, it's something when I first started my career, it was not so clear for me. Like, I always thought, I have to do things on all these certain default paths that are there, in terms of like, I made the decision to go to a business school because it was the right decision, being 19 or 20 years old, and to get a good job afterwards, work in a corporation, work your way up. Like, I kind of thought this would be the way I would go because this was the normal back then, but now we live in this entrepreneurial age. And I just want to say that in the end, people should realize that in terms of trying to be your best and take these risks so that you can be fulfilled, I do deeply believe that then you are always automatically doing it for the people around yourself as well.
That was great. I mean, there's nothing I can say that would beat what you just said. So
thank you.
I would like to thank you again for coming today. It was a pleasure. Would you like to leave your contact if people want to reach out?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess the easiest is probably just LinkedIn, for this, let's say, setting where I guess the podcast will be published.
Yeah.
Just find my name, find me on LinkedIn. And happy to connect. He's
nice. He replies, as you can hear.
I'm trying my best. It's not always easy to keep track of all the inboxes, but I guess it's not just the case for me. But usually I'll try. I will reply on LinkedIn if you reach out, and I appreciate actually. And this is something also just as a side note, but it goes a long way if people make the effort to actually write a personal message and give you a reason why they want to connect with you. Because I have a lot of contact requests that I have not taken yet, because I mean, nothing against these people, but I have never met them personally, and if they don't tell me why they really want to meet, like, and I kind of, that's what I said, I'm against this type of just networking for networking's sake. I believe in
I hate that.
Yeah, I believe in genuine human connections, so don't be afraid to reach out, but it's worth it to go the extra mile and really think about why do I want to connect with a person, because then that other person will much quicker reply than just true. Getting a standard message, let's say. Yeah.
Well, I wish you all the best for all your new adventures. I'm sure there will be a lot, because you're a curious person, and I'm sure there's a lot waiting for you. As you said, the world has a lot to offer.
Right.
And I'll hope to see you soon in another thing, another project. Who knows? Yeah,
who knows? And I, again, really appreciate it that you had me on the show here. And,
My pleasure.
These conversations are always great. And I hope that somebody will find some value in this.
Yes, I hope so too.
Congrats on this podcast. And I'm looking forward to many more episodes from you.
Thank you.
Hey, if you're still there, thanks a lot for listening. I really appreciate it. If you liked this episode, feel free to share it around so we give more visibility to the podcast. If you want to stay in touch, you can contact me on Instagram or LinkedIn. Or even better, you can sign up to my newsletter on outrospection.lu to receive your monthly dose of inspiration, motivation, and to see the latest episodes that were released. Thanks a lot, and see you in my next episode.